And we are going to start with roll call. Adriana.
Thank you, Vice Chair Flores. Kevin Bond.
Here.
Eric Brownfield.
Here.
Tyler Denham.
Here.
Kevin Doby.
Here.
Karen Flores. Sandy Flores.
Here.
Jackie Kellogg. Devonna McLaughlin. Moses Milazzo.
Here.
Corey Runge. Ross Schaefer.
Here.
Glenn Slivers. Haley Zaruya.
Here.
Thank you. Back to you.
All right, thank you. And before we move on to the land acknowledgement, we want to acknowledge some of you. Commissioner Schaefer, this is your last meeting and you have been here since the very, very beginning. Congratulations to you and thank you for being part of the commission. Commissioner Brownfield, I believe this is your last meeting as well. So thank you for your service on the commission. And also Commissioner Slivers, but I do not see him on the call. And then Commissioner Kellogg is up for reappointment and did apply, so best of luck to her. And with that, Tyler has graciously agreed to read the land acknowledgement. Tyler, I'll give it to you.
Yeah. So the Housing Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you so much. Adriana, do we have any members of the public?
We do have, I saw one member of the public in case they want to provide public comment. Now would be the time.
All right, let me read this little clause that I probably should have read first, sorry. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within their jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission on that day. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. So with that, do we have someone that would like to speak? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Next on our agenda is an approval of the minutes from the Housing Commission meeting of July 24th. If everyone has had a chance to review those, then we will entertain a motion to approve those.
This is Commissioner Zaruya. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Zaroya. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Denham. I'll second the motion.
Great, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, if all those in favor could say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions?
I wasn't here last time, so I will abstain. This is Moses.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Milazzo. All right, so those are approved, and our next item of business is a presentation and discussion on the 24-25 annual report for the 10-year housing plan, and I will give it back to Adriana Fisher.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandy. Just getting my screen up and running. Can everybody see the screen okay? Take that as a yes. Good
Yes.
Yeah, we
afternoon.
can.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Good afternoon, Housing Commissioners. As you know, I'm Adriana Fisher, your Housing Commission Liaison and Housing Program Manager for the Housing Office. This presentation provides a summary of the 2024-2025 annual report for the 10-year housing plan. The full report was included in your agenda packet for further reference. This presentation will begin with a brief overview of the 10-year housing plan to provide some context, followed by a summary of the 24-25 annual report. Time will be reserved at the end for questions and comments for the sake of time, since we have another item following up that is going to be quite time-consuming, lengthy. Right. In 2020, a housing emergency was declared to prioritize affordable housing within city operations and ensure safe, decent, and affordable housing opportunities for all community members. The 10-year housing plan adopted by City Council on February 15, 2022 was developed through extensive collaboration with community members and stakeholders. It serves as a guiding framework for housing programs, funding strategies, and policy decisions. The plan aims to create a vibrant, livable community with housing options for all income levels and housing sizes. The primary goal is to reduce Flagstaff's affordable housing need by half within the next 10 years. To achieve this, the plan elements support at least 6,000 low to moderate income residents and the creation or preservation of almost 8,000 housing units, with at least 10% being affordable. The implementation is supported by 13 policy initiatives and 58 comprehensive strategies carried out through the city's budget process and in collaboration with public, private, and nonprofit partners. The 2024-2025 annual report offers a comprehensive overview, including current market conditions. Some of this information may have been stolen from the realtors and the presenters from last month. Key highlights from the past year: progress toward the overarching goal, status updates on strategy implementation, available housing resources and community-led efforts, ongoing collaboration with partners, and legislative actions and advocacy efforts. Affordability remains a significant barrier in Flagstaff's housing market. The cost of living is 21.2% above the national average, with housing costs 51.6% higher. These conditions continue to impact everyone in our community. Median home prices now stand at $685,000 across all property types, with a median price of $787,000 for single-family homes only. Homes are remaining on the market longer, averaging 49 days compared to 20 days last year. And most listings fall between $500,000 and $900,000, with only 24% priced below $500,000. Local buyers increasingly rely on dual incomes, financial assistance, or family support to close the gap between wages and housing costs. Condos remain to be one of the most affordable homeownership options, with a median price of $345,000. To purchase a condo, a household would need an annual income between $82,000 and $95,000 based on a 3% down payment of $10,350, a standard 7.125% interest rate, and a debt to income ratio not exceeding 45%. This results in an estimated monthly housing payment of $3,078, including your standard $250 in homeowners association fees. By comparison, affording a single-family home requires an annual income between $165,000 and $177,000, more than twice the median household income of $69,700. This assumes a 3% down payment of $23,610, a 6.875% interest rate, and a debt-to-income ratio capped at 45%. The monthly housing payment for a single-family home would be approximately $6,104, or nearly 3 times what is considered affordable for the average household. The rental market remains expensive, but it is showing some early signs of stabilization. Flagstaff's average rent across all unit types is 6% above the national average of $2,200. Currently, average rent across all unit types is approximately $2,234 a month, which is $71 less than last year. 2-bedroom units average $1,992 per month, roughly $100 higher than national rates, but this figure is trending downward. This modest cooling provides some relief to renters, although rent growth continues to outpace wage increases for many residents. In 2024-2025, a total of 406 residents received assistance through various programs, including down payment assistance programs, community development block grant, projects, newly issued housing choice vouchers, otherwise known as Section 8 vouchers, affordable rental and homeownership units, and an additional 831 market rate units and 114 affordable units were created or preserved within our city limits. The graphic on your screen now represents data housing staff update on a quarterly basis to monitor and inform the community on progress toward the overarching goal of the plan. From February 15, 2022 through this past June, 1,093 residents have been impacted by various assistance programs, such as the ones mentioned previously on the last slide. 2,161 housing units have been constructed, with 14%, or 273 units, designated as affordable. And developers have committed to an additional 481 affordable units, though this number may fluctuate as commitments and agreements evolve. So the housing plan consists of 58 strategies spread across 13 policy initiatives. Before diving into the numbers, it's important to note that 39 of these strategies are projects with defined start and end dates. The remaining 19 strategies, about 1/3, are ongoing efforts that staff will work on continuously throughout the life of a plan and beyond, without a specific completion date. Now, 3.5 years into the 10-year housing plan implementation, just over 20% of all strategies are completed. Some of these strategies were not initially listed on an implementation plan, but we took an opportunity as it arose. 23 strategies, or 39%, are currently in progress, and 33% of the strategies are ongoing, reflecting sustained work over time. Only 4 strategies have not been started yet. We're making tangible headway. 3 strategies were completed in fiscal year 24-25. Thanks to the extensive efforts of the Land Availability and Suitability Study and Code Analysis project leads and collaborators, the city explored innovative tools and techniques aimed at reducing development costs, including infrastructure solutions. This foundational work will inform and guide future development efforts citywide. With the approval of the 2024-2025 budget, Housing Now has a full-time ongoing housing navigator effective last July. in 2024. This role supports both landlords and housing challenged residents to help maintain stable housing. And after much research, it has been determined that under current Arizona state law, the city cannot legally add new protected classes locally, such as age and source of income. Staff remain prepared to revisit this issue if the state law changes. As you may recall, the regional plan update is currently underway. It will be presented to City Council for adoption in October and to voters for ratification on May of 2026. 4 strategies are actively supported by this update. The first 2 aim to increase housing density. One supports higher density for affordable housing, while the other one helps the city identify suburban areas suitable for increased density and intensity. The third strategy revises goals and policies to reduce conflicts between affordable housing, historic preservation, and urban design. As part of this effort, the community character chapter is proposed to be eliminated and integrated into a new section of best practices for creating a sense of place. Lastly, the 4th strategy, relevant to the regional plan update, promotes adaptive reuse of existing buildings for affordable housing. This aligns with housing attainability and equity, a core priority of the updated regional plan. Staff currently also have about $3 million in bond funds dedicated to supporting this work. An additional 4 strategies from the reporting period are currently in progress, though not tied to a specific project. The city is exploring community land trusts and public-private partnerships to support the development of affordable ownership units. Housing staff are evaluating possible uses for city-owned parcels designated for affordable housing and will present their findings to City Council in the fall of 2025. In support of land acquisition efforts, staff are holding internal meetings this fall to establish a fund for acquiring land and units for affordable housing as opportunities arise. Housing staff successfully requested $500,000 through the fiscal year 24-25 budget process to initiate this strategy, and City Council approved the request. So the funds became available July 1 of 2024. Staff are now assessing the best path forward for a sustainable ongoing fund. To support vulnerable populations, staff are identifying resources for households experiencing or at risk of homelessness, first-time homebuyers, and other residents in need of affordable housing. In November 2022, voters approved Proposition 442, authorizing $20 million for rental and homeownership initiatives. I will break these funds down into categories on the next slide. And lastly, the city is pursuing the acquisition and rehabilitation of existing properties for affordable housing when feasible. This work is opportunity-driven and relies heavily on partnerships with private developers. Together, these efforts reflect meaningful progress in advancing financial infrastructure, land readiness, and scalable equity-focused housing programs tailored to Flagstaff's needs. And as noted previously, Flagstaff voters approved Proposition 442 in November of 2022, authorizing a $20 million bond fund to expand access to affordable rental and homeownership opportunities. Of the total funds, $5 million was allocated to incentivize private and nonprofit developers to include affordable rentals and market rate developments. This initiative led to the establishment of the Rental Incentive Bond Program, and all $5 million has now been reserved for upcoming projects. An additional $7 million was allocated to expand the city's Homebuyer Assistance Program, with the original general fund allocation depleted earlier this year in February to be specific. Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona was selected through a competitive process to administer the expanded program. Implementation began this month, and we're all very, very, very excited about it. A second phase of the program, which will introduce a permanent affordability component, is scheduled for council consideration in the fall, following a Housing Commission review next month. $3 million is dedicated to supporting the adaptive reuse of existing buildings into affordable rental housing. That program was reviewed by the Housing Commission last month. Thank you, Housing Commissioners. And staff will seek City Council approval in September. Finally, $5 million was reserved for the redevelopment of city-owned housing through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, Saradar's favorite acronym, RAD. A consultant has been selected through a competitive process to help administer the program, and project scoping is now underway to include a contract to be approved by council in the coming months. Despite national uncertainty surrounding federal funding for social programs, Flagstaff's Community Development Block Grant allocation increased by more than $68,000 this year. Housing staff continue to support long-term planning efforts, including the regional plan update and the Land Availability and Suitability Study and Code Analysis Project. How fast can we say it? Also known as a LASCAP. The land study phase concluded last fall, and the code analysis phase is nearing completion. It actually went to council last night if you would like to look back at that video. These initiatives are expected to reduce zoning and infrastructure barriers and strengthen the implementation of multiple housing strategies. Addressing Flagstaff's housing emergency continues to require coordinated action and strong partnerships. In the last fiscal year, the city has strengthened partnerships with organizations such as the Northern Arizona Association of Realtors, Northern Arizona University, the Coconino County Continuum of Care, and the Community Action Advisory Board, also known as CAB. Housing staff's partnership with NAR continues to grow. Monthly meetings serve as a platform for information sharing, stakeholder engagement, and collaborative efforts toward inclusive and sustainable housing strategies. The flyer on your screen now is actually one of our most recent collaborations, a home buyer resource and education event to coincide with the launch of the expanded Community Homebuyer Assistance Expansion Program, which now offers $50,000 in down payment and closing cost assistance to eligible households. In parallel, the Housing Office has entered its third consecutive year of partnership with NAU's Community and University Public Inquiry Pod, focused on housing security and sustainability. This collaboration connects students with real-world housing challenges and contributes to actionable research, expanded outreach, and increased analytical capacity for city staff. Staff also remain engaged in the COC and CAB, ensuring that local housing initiatives align with broader regional efforts to address homelessness and reduce poverty. These partnerships play a critical role in shaping policy and advancing shared solutions to Flagstaff's most pressing housing needs. Flagstaff's housing emergency has some obstacles to overcome. Flagstaff cannot locally expand fair housing protections such as source of income due to state preemption. However, staff continue to monitor future changes in state legislation. Local zoning tools are also constrained by state law, limiting the city's ability to increase flexibility or affordable housing solutions. One example is the state does not allow cities and towns to require affordable housing from developers. Or another example is a city's limited oversight of short-term rentals and second homes. Despite these barriers, City Council and organizations like the Arizona Housing Coalition continue to advocate for legislation that supports flexible and locally driven housing strategies. These efforts are ongoing and essential to long-term success. In conclusion, Flagstaff continues to make meaningful progress toward addressing the housing emergency through the creation and preservation of housing, targeted resident support, and policy advocacy. The city is laying a strong foundation for long-term impact. Despite this progress, the need remains urgent, particularly for workforce households, renters, and first-time homebuyers. Addressing this challenge will require sustained leadership, strategic partnerships, and continued investment in scalable, equity-driven solutions. With a collective commitment and focused action, the city remains on track to meet its 2032 housing goals. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you all for your continued support. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Awesome. Thank you, Adriana. As just a reminder, I put it in the chat also, but to type a C or a Q in the chat for any questions or comments. Seeing none. Thank you, Adriana. It was great to see some of the progress and check some boxes. Next up is a presentation by the Housing Director, Sarah Dar, regarding the city-owned land for housing. Sarah.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. I have worked to get everything set up so it would run smoothly, and I forgot the easiest step right at the beginning. I'd like to thank Adriana for that very polished presentation. I have to say it's a little intimidating presenting immediately after her. Adriana, I'm going to steal screen share, okay?
Please do. I can't figure out how to make it stop. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Let's see if I can do this one. Okay. All right. I think I got it. I have long tried to do this where my notes are on the same computer as this camera, and I think I may have figured it out. So thank you. And for those of you where this is your last meeting, I also want to join in on expressing our sincere appreciation for the commitment that you've made to furthering housing opportunities in Flagstaff. And I share that gratitude for those of you that are remaining as well. But thank you for your time and your volunteer efforts. This one's a fun one for nerds. So we've long told you this is coming. It's part of goals within the 10-year housing plan. A lot of work has gone into this over time. To create today's presentation, I went back and I harvested old presentations and then realized that the aerials were way outdated because we've been talking about city-owned land for housing for a long time. You'll see successes, what we've done in the past. I should advance a slide. There we go. We're going to go over the background and past projects, look at what our community, our current assets and opportunities are. We do have some staff recommendations. And then I missed this one. This is commission feedback. See, I got it on the other side. I was writing two presentations simultaneously. So our purpose is to review the city-owned land designated for housing, go over our staff recommendations, and then receive your feedback so that your feedback is in mind when we do this presentation to City Council in September. That is scheduled for September 9th. If you wish to watch in and join, it's going to look highly similar to this. Any feedback that you provide, I will provide as a part of that presentation as it goes to City Council. A little bit of framing before we jump into this to make sure that we're all working on the same page. I wanted to go a little bit over what the city cannot do and bigger of what we can. As Adriana just mentioned, and we mention regularly, is that we are unable to require others to build affordable units. That's a state law. We can't do it. Nor, this will shock some, not in this group, but in others, that we can't control or dictate the market. That's not the role of local government. Those forces are outside of our control underneath a different political structure that might look different, but this is where we are. It's not the city's job to control or to dictate that market. What we can do, so I wanted to go over, here's our limits, but what we can do is we can incentivize developers to include affordable units, which we do through the incentive policy and various programs Adriana covered a moment ago. And the other piece is that we can control how city-owned land that is not restricted in some way is utilized. So what do I mean by not restricted in some way? There are perfect examples looking at HERF funding. So which is highway user fund funding. When that money is allocated, it is for specific transportation improvements that impact land, et cetera. That comes with requirements. Something similar is parkland, or bond money previously approved by the voters. So areas of Buffalo Park are open space that were purchased with bond funds approved by the voters. Those are not on the table for discussion because those are limited in some way. There's also an ability for city council to limit land use or designate a specific land use. However, city councils cannot bind future city councils. So there is the ability to change those, what are restrictions, but within the city's control. So I wanted to frame that so that, you're not seeing Fox Glen Park pop up. Well, that's because it's parkland. We did work, we have over time for a long time worked with other city divisions, talking about how housing is complementary to some uses. Adriana has her hand up. What did I miss?
There's a question from our council liaison, Kara House, when
Okay.
appropriate.
Excellent. Okay. Let's do it now. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Adriana. I was just wondering if this would be better to wait till the end of the presentation, that's totally fine. But if you can further explain the affordable incentives program. I know there were some questions that I got the other day before the city council meeting about the a recent developer who paid into our affordable housing like funding in lieu of providing affordable units, and whether or not that was actually contributing to affordability in Flagstaff. So I'm hoping that we can have some more discussion about how that works and why that is a helpful option.
Okay. Councilmember House, thank you for the question. I want to be very careful in answering this because we don't have that agendized. So I'm going to give you the umbrella overall answer, and then we will put it on the agenda for next month for a little more. So the incentive program for affordable housing is a program created, well, there's been 2 iterations of it, created late 90s, created much better in 2009, probably 2011, that the program provides both financial and financial policy and regulatory incentives for developers choosing to include affordable housing in their developments. On the regulatory side, it's designed as a menu because each site is unique. And so not everybody needs an allowance for slope and resource protection, for example. And so some sites are flat and they don't need that. And so it's set up as a menu where if you are targeting a specific AMI level, they are entitled to, let's say, 1 incentive. And the deeper you skew your AMI assistance, your AMI targets, the more incentives you can pick from the menu. And so that's the regulatory side. The policy and financial side is funding that is budgeted within the city budget on an annual basis to pay on behalf of developers, including affordable housing, proportionally only for the affordable units, fees associated with doing that. So by state law, we are unable to waive impact fees, but we can pay those fees on behalf of the developer. And so, and not only impact fees, but fees associated with building permits, other city fees in that area. Those funds are reserved on a first come, first served basis based on what our allocation is for that budget year. There is not an ongoing funding stream feeding that incentive fund. Now, with that said, the commitment from city management in the past multiple years has been, if we are receiving more requests for funding than we have, that we go to budget team and say, here's what we have. What do you have in the couch cushions? Or, as I'm sure you're familiar with household budgets, municipal budgets are similar. There's increased flexibility at times. You didn't, our finance, actually, he's not finance director anymore, he's management services director, hates when I do this, but it makes sense to me. You didn't go out to eat this month, so therefore you have an extra however much money's in that category to spend somewhere else. Municipal budgeting is on a much larger scale with a lot more rules and regulations on it, but in essence, if you don't spend it in one area, perhaps it can be moved to another. So that's the mid-year budgeting function that can take place. And so we recently have taken a request for additional funding for the incentive program based on anticipated development coming forward. So where does the money go for in lieu development? That money comes in and is programmed through the city's budget process. Many of those in lieu contributions, for example, the one council heard, I guess it was only this week, it feels like a long time ago. Those monies are due and payable at C of O, or the certificate of occupancy, per each housing unit. So it was a big amount of money, but it's going to come to us over time. And when that money accumulates to a level where it makes sense to budget it to do something significant, we bring that forward for discussion through the city's budget process. If we want to go deeper into that, I would recommend we do that as a separate agendized item next time. So let us know what your thoughts are if we answered those questions, or folks desire additional clarification in that area, and we're happy to do that. I really don't like to make the city attorney's office mad or violate open meeting law, either way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. I was talking about, complementary uses. And so you'll see in a couple of these things coming up is where we've already partnered with some other city divisions on sharing land in complementary ways. You'll see some community gardens, that type of thing. And so that comes back to us in other ways as well, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. So when we're talking about options for city-owned land, and I went through these with our real estate manager, is that these are the big options. Of course, are there nuances to all of it? Absolutely. But our big options are hold, sell with conditions, lease, or city-initiated development. And so when we say hold, that doesn't have to mean forever. When we say sell and sell with conditions, our charter actually calls for any disposition of land to be for highest and best use, to maximize return. However, we can talk about that return being, rather than necessarily financial consideration, it is community contribution. Lease can be long-term lease, short-term lease, etc. And then city initiated development would be where we would put out a solicitation of, we would like this done, and identify a partner. When I say city initiated development, I want to be incredibly clear that I am not talking about city crews or housing staff or anyone else on city staff swinging hammers and doing it ourselves. Partnerships are incredibly key into being successful in this area, as is funding and funding availability. And as we've talked to you about many times, is that funding, there are municipalities and governmental entities have access to funds that others don't, and others have access to funds that we don't. And so partnering in any opportunity that we have strengthens projects, can create additional funding structures, etc. So when you read that, that is not the Sarah's taking over the world and building things. It is that we would pursue partners, but we would initiate what that looks like, of course, through community participation processes. So some basic use considerations for housing when we're evaluating a piece of property. This is not a comprehensive list because there are so many different specific site considerations, but this is the starting place. So Are we looking at land value? We are. And we're looking at that value not only as in cash, but what value can it add within the community? Very practical things like access, floodplain, access to infrastructure. You can't build residential housing in certain areas of floodplain, so that washes pieces of property out. That was not meant to be a pun on the flood and the wash. We look at resource and slope conditions. Some things are incredibly sloped where it doesn't make sense that housing may be built there or really anything. Funding viability. Funding for housing or to create affordable housing sometimes comes with some very specific considerations. For example, low-income housing tax credit projects are ideally located so that they can compete and win funding near certain amenities. And so we look at what might the funding source be for this. We look at proximity to transit and services. We're talking about more vulnerable members of our community in most cases. And so what does proximity to transit and services look like? Are we setting people up for success? Are we making it a spot that makes sense for folks to be in? And then other possible uses besides housing. So is this a new model? This is not a new model. What I'm going to present to you today for staff recommendations after we go through a selection of what's been done in the past. We're breaking ground in some areas, but we are not the first pioneers into this. At this point in time, the city has been doing this for a very long time. In fact, the Housing Authority was first established in 1942, with the first development being built in 1952, city-owned land. And so before that, there were vouchers. That's why the Housing Authority existed before that. And so this is not new. I promise you, I'm not dragging us all the way back to the 50s. I'm going to start in the 90s. So we're going back a decent distance, but one of the first forays into this in recent history resulted in the creation of Mountainside Village, old name Cedar Crest, new name. The city published a solicitation. The land was sold with requirements for affordability, and this resulted in the first low-income housing tax project in Flagstaff. The purchase was in 1994. The units were constructed in 96, I believe placed in service in 97. It's 81 units. In 1996, they made a 30-year affordability commitment. We actually carry a mortgage on this property. It's an interest-only 30-year mortgage with a balloon payment at the end. In 2015, Mountainside Village took advantage of the rehabilitation refinance program via LIHTC, where they did a major rehabilitation of the property. It was 80 units before that. They added a unit, a manager's unit at this 2015 opportunity. We renewed our financing documents and they extended their agreement 30 years from the time that those credits were awarded and placed in service. And so that's one model where we've been more financially involved. It wasn't money necessarily directly out of our pocket, but it is a deferral of the realization of financial resources coming back to the city. And so this was one of the first pieces. This area map, this is Isabel. You're going to see other areas in here. This is Isabel Homes. We're going to talk about this vacant parcel right here. This is a local domestic violence facility and accompanying transitional housing apartments behind it. That was city-owned land that we partnered with a nonprofit on in a different way. We don't usually publicize what this is, what it's used for, etc. So thank you for your patience with my vagueness. Rio Homes, another significant foray. This is a total of 153 units with 30 affordable. This property was identified for housing use in the 1996 housing plan. That's before I started here. And waited until adjacent development was extending infrastructure closer to the site in order to make it usable. It wasn't connected by roads. It wasn't connected to utilities, etc. So it was a hold piece. You're going to see hold in recommendations. It's for things like this. An RFP was issued in 2002 with a I almost said 2023, 2003 development agreement with a public-private partnership. The land was sold through this process for both financial consideration and the provision of permanently affordable units. The proceeds from this sale were used to purchase additional property for housing purposes. So not only did we realize units, that funding has since been utilized to purchase other properties we'll talk about. We were the first to wade into permanent affordability in Arizona. This was done with raw documents created. We had no model to follow. No one had utilized permanent affordability under Arizona law. We learned a lot. And so these units over time have been converted to land trust units where appropriate in order to fit financing considerations. 3 of the affordable units were lost to the market during the 2008 Great Recession. It's very unusual for units like that to be lost. 2008 was some pretty unique conditions, and the deed restriction as originally created was not flexible enough to save those units. Like I said, we learned a lot of lessons, and we have not seen that happen again. But I want to point out that when you're breaking ground with things, you're not always perfect with it, and it takes some time to learn. The units were originally targeted for 80% AMI. That limit has since gone up to 125% AMI. Why can we do that? There's no federal money in here. It's all local money, local rules. And so we were able to adapt that. It had a fairly long build out, built between 2005 and then of course Great Recession hit, which slowed down development. I believe the last units were constructed in 2010. You can see the type of timeline process that sometimes this can take. This one also had a Great Recession in the middle of it, and it's hard to account. It's hard to account for those. At the same time that RFP was released, an additional one was released on High Country Trail for land that is between, you're going to be like, there's not land right there. There is, between High Country Trail, which is the western edge of Ponderosa Trails, and I-17. So this site was characterized by high tension power lines, slope, rock. It's a sliver, points at one end. It was a difficult development piece. However, again, through a public-private partnership, the land was sold for financial consideration and the provision of affordable rental units, resulting in 180 affordable rental units in 3 different developments. Sandstone Highlands was built first. That's a senior property. Timber Trails was second. That is targeted at families. And then High Country Estates, our townhome style product in the middle of the 2 multifamily style products that are structured as a tenant lease purchase under the LIHTC program. And so these were constructed in phases. So again, it was a longer build out time period because they had to go apply for credits in separate years and then build to meet those deadlines. So 180 affordable rental units plus additional funding resulting from that sale. Habitat along Butler. Years ago, City Council directed us to use remnant land remaining from other projects throughout the city. There were parcels along Butler that were remaining from the Butler widening and realignment project. You can see this piece highlighted here. You can't see it. Can you see it now? Can you see my cursor? I don't know. The red piece in the middle is an example of a remnant parcel. That's right now where the 2 starter homes sit. It's actually combined with this little triangle at the bottom as well. There are 4 of these homes along the Butler corridor that this one you can see is a little skinnier and longer. That is what fit on the piece of property that we had. I loved this because the units are consistent with the style and architecture of the neighborhood. And we were able to utilize land that was just sitting there. Keeping going, Isabel Homes project. This project took a long time. It was purchased with CDBG money, and it actually contained 6 nearly uninhabitable relocated Navajo Army Depot units, original units, and a Knights of Columbus building that was only being used for storage. And the city was able to purchase with CDBG dollars and conduct the necessary environmental remediation and demolition. With that, we approached the market with one model that worked until we hit recession and changed models. And so there are 16 land trust program homes on this piece of property. It's between Isabel and West. This is the Hal Jensen Recreation Center. The tax credit property I mentioned a minute ago is down in the lower, it's not on the screen, but if it was, it would be in the lower left-hand corner. 10 homes were built by Love and Contracting and 6 homes built by Habitat for Humanity, all land trust homes. Here's a trade. So we did a trade with a private developer for the piece of property you see outlined in red at the corner of Butler and my old lone tree. And so trading this property resulted in the developer being able to face units towards Butler instead of facing them towards the site at the side street, which made the site larger. And we traded this property for the consideration of including one land trust program home within a 6-unit market rate project. So we do truly have land trust homes hidden in other places, and this worked out well. Woodshire and Butler, was that really? Yes, it was. So Woodshire and Butler owned a property adjacent to a city-owned property. They were interested in expanding their site. It wasn't very big, but it would make a critical difference to their development. So we issued an RFP to sell this remnant parcel containing an obligation to build 5 permanently affordable units. The property was sold to that developer of the adjacent 50-unit condo project. And so again, use of city-owned land to leverage other investment from the private market, resulting in units and market rate projects. Bringing us even closer to current day is what will be called Isabel Street Apartments. This is Mountainside Village. This is Isabel Homes between, you can't see my cursor, I apologize. Isabel Homes is at the top. Mountainside Village are the buildings you see off to the left-hand side. Between Isabel and West, this property was acquired through a land trade and then designated partially for use by housing. This is regional detention basin at the bottom. And this was part of the scattered site proposal you've heard us talk about, where we put property out and developer was able to obtain tax credits for one of the sites, but then had to return them. It was right at the start of when the bottom fell out of the tax credit market multiple years ago, 2018 or so. Since then, we've been seeking other opportunities for them. The qualified allocation plan, which is the document that specifies how to apply or how properties score for the use of, I'm sorry, wow, lost words. What the scoring looks like to be successful for an award of low-income housing tax credits. This site is not big enough to hold what is now the threshold for applying for a LIHTC project. It was designed with 11 3-bedroom rental units. The original developer of the property was kind enough to share their site plans with Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona, and we executed a long-term lease with Housing Solutions that will enable them to construct and manage, again, long-term 11 3-bedroom rental units on the property. When I talked about shared compatible uses, we share this site with a community garden. They asked, what do you think? It made sense. The community garden is located right now down immediately north of the detention basin that also serves as a BMX bike park. It makes sense to take a private use and temper it with a semi-public use against a heavy public use. So during the construction of these 11 homes, the community garden will be relocated. But again, the community garden is a complementary use to housing units. And so when I talk about working with other divisions in the community or in the city and other functions within the community, it makes sense to have a community garden on site. It's not taking up significant land use that's impeding site usability, et cetera. And that brings us to the conclusion of examples of what we've done in the past. We've leased, we've sold, we've traded, and all resulting in the construction of units. What I'm about to go into is a review of the city-owned land designated for housing now. There are 9 sites, 7 of those are vacant, 2 are currently utilized. It'll make sense in a minute, I promise. We took into consideration size, zoning, site-specific uniqueness. We also took into consideration 10-year plan goals. And also, as we go into the recommendations, what our staffing capacity is and the reality of what we have the ability to move now and what we need to wait on. We also did an analysis of the last opportunity sites. Those opportunity site numbers are included in the following slides when they are opportunity sites. We have a couple that are too small to even qualify as an opportunity site. You're going to see staff recommendations in 3 categories. 1 is hold, more work is required. The second is hold for a nonprofit opportunity or city-initiated project. You're going to see these on the pieces of property that are much smaller than the others and are really need a niche project in order to be successful. They're not large enough to pencil to pursue other substantial funding sources. And then you're going to see recommendations of move forward. And those recommendations with move forward are going to get more specific as we go into this. So here we go. 10-year housing plan goals. What we're looking at doing. 1, and absolutely critical, is ensure affordable housing is a part of every Flagstaff neighborhood and work to address disparate impact as part of any development or redevelopment. When I was talking earlier about the properties of Mountainside Village, Cedar Crest Apartments, Isabel Street Apartments, Isabel Homes Projects, that's a cluster. And while it works, that's not appropriate to do on an ongoing basis. We owned land in that area. We've utilized it. We've done the best we can with it, but it's really important to a stable community to distribute housing of all types throughout the community. Clustering it is not a sustainable function. Protect 2.2, encourage diversity of housing options in all neighborhoods, understanding that exclusive communities are incompatible with our mission to protect and enhance the quality of life for all. You may be a little bit surprised to see this next one in here. I'll explain it in a minute, but create 3 is create a dedicated funding source for affordable housing in Flagstaff. And then 5, this is why we're here, really prioritize the development of city-owned land designated for affordable housing and evaluate other city-owned parcels for affordable and mixed-income housing. I've been working on the land inventory project with the city for the last 20 plus years. I'm not going to say I know it all because I don't, but I am intimately familiar with a lot of the parcels, what they were purchased for, and the city just doesn't purchase land for fun. It's usually a designated funding source or a designated purpose in mind. But what I do want to mention is that there is an internal process in place within our organization that is a result of the declared housing emergency that is in place for housing staff to have the opportunity to weigh in on property that is being considered for use or disposal. The example here is a parks example. And so as parks moves through their development of their master plan, we've already had, or the implementation of their master plan, apologies. We've already had conversations where in some areas, the park is adjacent to some existing housing, and does it make sense to use a piece of that land to extend housing along park frontage or different iterations of that? And so we have those conversations internally with other divisions. We work very hard. I say we. I work at one level. The other staff works on like constantly knocking on the doors of being like, hey, let's chat. What's planned here? Does this make sense here? And there are places it doesn't make sense. And there is land that was purchased for specific purposes where it's just not an option. But we're keeping those conversations going and do have this official process in place for us to be able to evaluate that property in partnership with the use or the considered disposal, so that we have the ability to incorporate it where possible. So it's not a one-time thing, evaluate. This is an ongoing thing of evaluate. I'm going to start big, and we're going to start with the largest piece that we have. This is along John Wesley Powell. Its common name is the shark bite. The bottom property line is right along John Wesley Powell. It's surrounded on the northern side by Juniper Point Development, community colleges to the north, Pine Canyon immediately to the south. And in fact, the city obtained this piece of property via Pine Canyon and a lawsuit settlement. Pine Canyon had specified this would be their affordable housing contribution in a development agreement in the mid-90s. They were targeting 125 manufactured homes for this property. Through this other legal action, it ended up being deeded to us. We've held true to the 125 number. Will it be manufactured housing? I don't know. It's within the John Wesley Powell specific area plan boundaries, meaning this entire area is being planned with the various property owners, looking at the John Wesley Powell Boulevard extension out to 4th Street, etc. And so housing staff is participates in that process, etc., making sure that we're advocating for this piece of property. It has some pretty significant slope considerations, which is why I included this other graphic here. It's a beautiful piece of property. It has amazing views up along John Wesley Powell, but it also slopes down pretty quickly. With that said, this site cannot be gravity sewered independently. It would have to connect to an adjoining property or utilize a pressurized sewer system with a lift station to bring wastewater up onto John Wesley Powell. So our goal here has been to coordinate timing with surrounding development and the extension of John Wesley Powell. We're also exploring a possible shared use with the fire department. Their mapping shows this is an ideal location for a future fire station, given the anticipated development along the John Wesley Powell corridor. Now I say that, but I want to be super clear that what we've told the fire department is sure, we can share, but there's compensation. It's not just, yes, you can have a piece of property, but this is an asset. It's a rare asset for us as a housing division, as a community, and that compensation needs to be built in somehow. Could that be compensation where they extend utilities? Sure. Could it be actual cash money? Sure. They're not far enough into that planning process to know what that looks like. We've opened the door and said yes, with conditions, and that we're open to that compensation being satisfied in a variety of ways. So we're working to be a good partner. At the very same time, we are working to ensure the maximization of the realization of housing units for our community, either resulting on this site or enough funding for those units to be provided on another site. It is one of the last opportunities. It sounds like I'm saying last. I'm sorry. Last opportunity sites, and our staff recommendation for this is hold. There's more work required as the area plan is finalized, and we're able to see what other development is coming in, as the fire department is better able to define what that looks like for them. Parks, of course, is interested. Parks is a complementary use to housing. So does it make sense to incorporate a park with housing? It does. So more work is required on this, and that work is going to come over time. It's already underway, as you can see, with the specific area plan and the other conversations considering this entire area. So our staff recommendation here, hold. Thorpe and Aztec, let me give you a bit of orientation here. The road along the bottom is Thorpe Road. The road intersecting it that you can see on the right-hand side is Aztec. Clark Homes are the units you see on the left-hand side of the graphic. The grass that you see on the right-hand side of the graphic are the baseball fields that are across Thorpe Road. So we are across and west of the new Marshall School site. The Thorpe Public Works Yard is immediately to the south of this property, as are these sports courts that appear in the very bottom of the picture. So right now this is all one parcel. The big grassy part on the bottom is a multi-use field. It is an active parks use. However, they are open to development of the back piece of this parcel as housing. This is actually the original location for Clark Homes when it was built in the 30s and 40s. It's actually where my grandparents lived when they first moved to the community in the 40s. And so there are some old foundations on this site. There are some old abandoned utilities on the site. It is zoned public facility, which, as you remember, council approved an ordinance or a change to the zoning code allowing housing to go into the PF zone with a conditional use permit. There is an amendment to the zoning code coming forward for council consideration, I want to say in September, that would allow if it's 100% affordable. Oh, I'm mixing up projects. I'm mixing things in my head. Let me get back to you on that. But at most, it would be a conditional use permit for this site. We've had different conceptual drawings over the years, and we've learned more and more about this piece as we get into it. This purple outline right here is an existing Head Start facility, which is highly complementary to housing uses, especially those occupied by families. This purple line is an approximation, as when the original documents were executed years and years and years ago. It says the actual boundaries will be agreed upon between the city and, at that time, the Clark Homes organization, and there was never an official boundary description. We've had it surveyed. It's not in the GIS system as a separate piece, so those are my lines, but those are approximate. There's a couple pieces here that need more work. One is an ordinance. It's a city ordinance. This is, again, let me circle back to city councils can say this is what we want this land used for. That can be changed by other city councils, but this was designated for park use, museum use. You may remember the conversation surrounding the old city public works yard. That's in this same area. So is the house that I grew up in, which is a couple blocks away from this site. That's also in this area. And so this ordinance hasn't always been in the forefront, but through research, it was identified and creates, I don't want to say a barrier, it creates a consideration, a conversation, if you will. This property has residential on two sides, parks on two sides. It is identified as an opportunity site within the LAS. And then here's the bigger consideration, and this one I'm going to call a challenge. So when the land was originally deeded to the city, it was deeded way back in the day for parks and something else use. It's escaping my mind. Since then, Aztec was realigned and Aztec was relocated to the east, which created a strip along the eastern edge of this property that still holds restrictions that, in order for us to cross it or to build upon it or to do anything, it takes action by both state parks and at the federal level with either national parks or Department of Interior. We are required to, if it is changed, like right now it's fine, but if it's changed, I'm scrolling for my notes here, would trigger conversion, which means finding a replacement property of greater equal appraised value. Is that doable? It's absolutely doable. There's not a, it's a strip along here. It's not a large piece, but it is something that has to be done. And it is something that also has to undergo a state review before it gets forwarded to a federal level review. And so that can be a very time consuming process. So can we move on this one right now? For development, no. But this work, the real estate staff within the city has recently approached us saying, what else can we do to help you? This is one of the things we're going to ask for help with, is for them to work on getting the state and federal restriction removed. This is really the only side, the eastern side is the only side that makes sense for access. The Clark Homes property, the infrastructure is not sized, is not of an appropriate size that could carry the traffic into the site, and we would also have to execute a lease, execute a use agreement with Clark Homes. Clark Homes is not owned by the city of Flagstaff. It's owned by the Flagstaff Housing Corporation. We do operate Clark Homes on behalf of that corporation, but it is not a city asset. And so access really makes sense off of the eastern side. We also would need to pull infrastructure and utilities up Aztec. And the last time we priced that was about 8 years ago, and it was close to $1 million. So there'll be some other development considerations here to work through. Recommendation on this one, hold. We need to do some more work on it. All right. West Street and Linda Vista. So this is adjacent to Cedar Safeway. That's the big roof you see on the right. The green you see is Buffalo Park, and the triangle at the bottom is where all the new flooding infrastructure is being installed as we speak. This property was identified for use of housing. It's a remnant parcel. We said, hey, can we use that? It was part of the scattered site process. While it is 1.3, 1.4 acres, less than an acre is actually usable. There are access easements into the Cedar Safeway Shopping Center that cross it. There's also a public access easement to be reserved at the top adjacent to the homes on the northern edge. This is one of those ones I was mentioning. It's not going to pencil for development without a specialized funding source or a very specific purpose. Let's say city initiated development of some type. You don't see a last opportunity site number on it because it's too small to even qualify as an opportunity site within the criteria within the land use study. And so our recommendation here is let's hold it for an opportunity to surface. And let me tell you, those opportunities do surface. From our nonprofits or something where we're like, we have an opportunity to pursue this funding source, this piece makes sense, but because of its size, it doesn't make sense to put out a solicitation for its use at this point in time. Along a similar vein is property that is left over from Lone Tree realignment. So the piece, the picture with the red in it, the larger road you see running through there is Lone Tree. The piece that curves down and intersects with Lone Tree is O'Leary. And so while this is a larger piece, we had a developer last year who just was convinced that they could, on almost 5 acres of property, we can put a light tech project here. Well, there's really about 1/3 of an acre that's actually buildable. This is the map on the bottom is showing slope. Those are all the little lines, and then floodway. And so this is a site that has a community garden down here off of the top plateau part. It makes sense. We can't build housing down there. It's terraced. It's providing community garden use. This site has a concept plan that was drawn 100 years ago, not quite 100 years ago, that shows between 6 to 8 units being able to be constructed on this site. The property line actually goes a little bit further. This piece is an access easement on the northern end, just above that property line. So the site looks a little bit bigger. South Side over the years has expressed a desire for a park in their neighborhood. This has been one of the potentially identified sites. However, within the South Side plan, it is labeled as a housing opportunity site. Housing funds were used to upsize the water line when the community garden was put in. Housing paid to upsize the water line pulled across O'Leary in order to support development of housing on the parcel. Again, this is a small one. Our staff recommendation is hold for possible nonprofit opportunity or city-initiated project. Those are off of our hold ones. Let's move on to 180 in Schultz Pass. It's a little over 3 acres. It is zoned for medium density residential. Housing funds were used for the purchase and also to stub utilities to the site. It is intersected by a regional gas line. If you look at the site design on the lower picture, you see that there are housing units on the top and housing units on the bottom with this big open piece in the middle. That's where that regional gas line is. That regional gas line can be paved over at the most. Housing cannot exist on top of that line. So that's one of the site considerations for this piece. It is identified as a last opportunity site. If I can direct your attention to the top picture with the turquoise triangle, you see that it looks like the land goes a little bit further and then it's white. That's not actually just slide, that's county. Actually, county starts right at, this is the edge of our municipal boundaries. And the piece that's reflected here is county, but they show what your topography is in the mapping program. So it is right up against the edge of the city boundaries. This, of course, was part of the scattered site proposal originally, and then removed through a decision by city management and city council at the time, 2017 or so, due to a large amount of community opposition to any housing being developed on this site. The site plan that you see here was drawn by an internal architect at the time. It shows 26 townhome style units. The density isn't able to be much more than that given the site constraints created by the regional gas line. Sawmill. Oh, wait, go back. Staff recommendation. Our staff recommendation here is to move forward with issuing a solicitation prioritizing development of housing units for local workforce. Sarah, why is this not more prescriptive? Why didn't you say rental, or why didn't you say ownership, or why didn't you put an AMI level in there? Well, because the more prescriptive we get with it, the less proposals we're going to get. We would really like to see what the potential is for this site. We also know that in our community, our needs for housing are not limited to 80% and below. This land is unencumbered by any other funding source dictating what that AMI might be. And we would like to see what the market would put here. We have been contacted repeatedly over the years by many developers, some interested in homeownership, some interested in rental. It is not of a size that will score well for a LIHTC project or be able to meet the minimum number of units required to apply for LIHTC, nor will it score well for its proximity to amenities. So we would like to, and I have the recommendations at the end and we can look at them and get feedback. So don't worry, I'm not dictating. We have an opportunity for feedback, but to issue a solicitation prioritizing development of housing for our local workforce. Let's talk about Sawmill. This is a fun one. So this piece exists between Old Lone Tree and New Lone Tree. The cutout on the corner is the building. I'm blanking. It's a realty utilized by a realty company right now, and I'm blanking on which one that is. Forgive me. But it's the house with the mannequin upstairs. So if somebody wants to give credit to that realty company, since who is it?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's so funny.
So yeah, my mind just went blank. But anyway, that's the corner. It's currently being utilized as staging for the Lone Tree overpass. So that's why it looks so busy. However, it was deeded to the city by the Sawmill development for the purposes of housing. And this presents us with a unique opportunity. This site is zoned highway commercial. Highway commercial allows housing to take place above or behind commercial uses by right. It doesn't require it, it allows it. This was the site that was substituted in place of the 180 and Schultz Pass property during that process. It did work for a light tech project with scattered site, which means you're applying for one project on multiple parcels. It won't pencil that way anymore for light tech. It is identified as a last opportunity site, and I'm going to give you the staff recommendation, and then I'm going to tell you why. So staff recommendation is to issue a solicitation prioritizing ongoing funding for housing programs via a public-private partnership. We were negotiating a final agreement with a commercial developer for use of this city property with 2 commercial pads and between 8 and 12 units of housing when this property was removed from that process and put into the scattered site process in lieu of 180 and Schultz Pass. Within that agreement, it was ongoing funding via market rate lease fees that would have been designated as a funding source for housing. Is this going to bring us millions of dollars? No, maybe over time, long time. But right now we have absolutely no ongoing funding source for housing programs. We know that it is viable for commercial. It wouldn't be a high intensity commercial so that it is compatible with its residential use on one side. And this is positioned, as you've seen with our other properties, where we don't really have properties in commercial areas. And so we know, we've been approached over the years, over and over and over by all kinds of folks for commercial uses for this piece of property. We would like to see what that can bring to the table. When we're talking about creating an ongoing funding source for housing within the city's own financial budgets, without creating a new tax or a fee, it means money has to be removed from another area. And that discussion's coming fall or spring. And so this is a way we could create at least a starting piece of ongoing funding coming into housing programs to accomplish other objectives without imposing a new tax or fee or taking funding from another existing program in another area of the city. Looking at my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything here. Nope, it looks like I got it all. So we know that it is commercially viable. We know that it is residentially viable, but given the fact that it is uniquely located with some unique site characteristics, this is our staff recommendation. I'm going to take you on a quick detour. And as you notice, we're not like missing anything. We're just getting off of our main path for a second. And I'll tell you why. I want to talk about redevelopment of public housing. So all of our public housing in Flagstaff and the property associated with it is owned by the city of Flagstaff. However, that land is restricted by declarations of trust that limit its use to affordable housing. And this is a graphic. Don't try to read it. It's a copy of a declaration of trust, an actual one. But our largest pieces of property that are positioned to create the greatest number of units in the community are our public housing properties. And Adriana mentioned RAD, totally RAD. This project is called Rental Assistance Demonstration Project. I hate this name. RAD was established by HUD in the 2000s in order to address the massive backlog of deferred capital and maintenance needs that have resulted from a lack of sufficient congressional funding over decades in order to address those needs on an ongoing basis. So RAD was established to give housing authorities more flexibility to access private and public funding sources. And it also gives us the ability to reduce reliance on annual congressional appropriations. This would result in us executing a contract with escalation features within it that would tell us exactly how much money we're getting from HUD to support the assisted housing. Whereas now, Sometimes we're 8 months into the federal fiscal year before we know what our allocation is. And let me tell you, that is a nightmare to manage budgeting wise. This would also allow us to create our own replacement and reserve funds. We were required to do that, but it would also enable us to do that, to engage in some long-term planning with some predictability instead of, well, this year we got 600,000 in capital funds and we have this huge need over here. And this year we got $1 million, and it's difficult working on that annual process. And so one more about what we're talking about, RAD redevelopment. What we're talking, RAD provides an opportunity for just a financial conversion, or rehabilitation of the units, or redevelopment of the units. And so if you've been in our public housing sites, they are low density. I'll get into that in a second. And they are aging housing stock that is expensive to maintain. RAD allows the preservation and improvement of affordable housing. This is weedy, but essentially public housing would convert to long-term Section 8 contracts. That does not mean vouchers. It means we're under the Funding 8 platform, and that contract that I'm referring to is where the certainty comes in, is for ongoing funding at predictable levels. And that it also allows us to access private financing for repairs or redevelopment by allowing us to secure private debt against the land. And so right now we can't do that. It's not allowed. Through this process, it opens up that asset to be able to secure debt against for redevelopment, with repayment coming through both our subsidy from HUD and rental income from folks occupying those units in the long term. And so it's complex. This is the high level flyover for it. But in essence, that's what that does. Again, our management services director hates when I equate it to things in private life, but it's like getting a home equity loan for your property. You use the equity that you have, you invest it back into the property, and then pay off your home equity loan. It's much more complex than that. That's how it works in my head. This also will leverage investment for redevelopment. It'll allow us to combine public and private funds to redevelop our housing stock. In going down this road, it's going to involve LIHTC funding and projects. It can involve some foundational funding. The funding sources for RAD redevelopment, the capital stack, sometimes called the funding lasagna. We have seen pro formas as deep as 12 or 13 different sources of funding coming together to make this a reality. I hope we don't have to have that many, but if we do, we do. And then the key cornerstone of all of this, which I usually mention first, is resident protection. No one's going to lose their housing. This process ensures that their tenant rights are preserved. They have the first right of return to the property after redevelopment. And of course, we must provide housing for them during redevelopment. They have the right of first return. If they don't want to live there, we're required to issue them a Section 8 voucher. And so it's scary to talk about redeveloping housing units occupied by households facing housing vulnerability. No one will lose housing through this process. It's also required by HUD that no one lose housing via this process. So that's the end of the detour. Why did I tell you that? Because we have some pretty large sites developed at some pretty low density. Seiler Homes, where my office, where I'm sitting right now. So if I point out the window, that's why. We're a little over 19 acres. We have 100 units in 74 buildings here. That's about 5 units an acre. It's a pretty low density. It was built in 1970. Our zoning is high density residential. And let me tell you, when it was built, there were some corners cut. The gas lines on the property, which by the way, we own and operate, when they were installed originally, the contractor that built the property used thread protectors, metal pipe shipped with screw-on pieces on the end to protect the threads from bending. They used those thread protectors to couple those gas lines together instead of using actual couplers. Well, that a couple of years ago resulted in almost a system-wide failure of every joint, which was very expensive. We had to relocate the entire development for weeks while we shut down the system and made those repairs throughout that system. This year, we just finished our gas line inspections and there were some minor things to fix, but nothing like the failures we had in the past. The units are older. They don't hold the right electrical wiring for many of the appliances that we could purchase and put in these units today. You can see our unit breakdown here. This was a property designed for families. It is designed as or designated as an opportunity site. It's where our main office is. There's also an activity center here called the Shack, which confused the heck out of me when I started over here because I'm like, why are we calling it a shack and a house? It stands for Siler Homes Activity Center, not actually a shack. Currently, that's occupied by Tinkertopia, which is a use I love having in the middle of this development, and also a Head Start Center, which I look out at their playground on an everyday basis. Lately, the game is scream and run as loud as you can. Slightly distracting, but it is lovely to have children immediately outside my window. Most times. Brandon Homes is a little over 22 acres. It's zoned medium density residential. This one was developed over a 10-year time span, 52 to 62. There's 127 units on this site, which comes out to about 5.5 dwelling units per acre. Again, low density. There's lots of opportunity here. We have an office on the site with a maintenance shop. And then Cogdale Recreation Center, currently utilized by Boys and Girls Club, is within this site. It is identified as a last opportunity site as well. These units are older. They haven't had the same systemic failures we've seen here at Siler at times. But their plumbing, say the units constructed in 1952, our maintenance staff is very skilled at reworking plumbing parts to fit, because we can't get plumbing parts to fit some of these units, nor do we have enough capital money to largely overhaul all of the major systems that need work. However, our units are not condemnable. They're not in a dangerous condition. They're not in, some housing authorities have units, they just have to take offline because they are not habitable. We're not in that spot. That's really fortuitous for us. We're not being forced into this redevelopment process. Rather, we're utilizing it as an opportunity to take these large areas of land and create additional and more housing opportunities within them. Now we're veering all the way back onto our track, which is talking about vacant city land dedicated for housing. There is a parcel immediately adjacent to Siler Homes. The pink right here are public housing authority units, including the scattered site units across the street. We were able to acquire this property in 2018 for housing purposes. It's unencumbered by any other requirements. When I said we utilized funding from the sale of previous property to purchase other funding, this is one of those sites. It is identified as a last opportunity site, and the intent here is for it to be incorporated into the redevelopment. So it gives us more property here, and there are several ideas of how it can be incorporated. It will be one neighborhood. It won't be that neighborhood over there. It's that direction. Sorry, I'm pointing. It will be incorporated into the overall redevelopment of Siler Homes. So our staff recommendation for this one is continue the RAD process. Adriana mentioned we're in final negotiations with a project management firm to help us carry that process forward. So to quickly review the recommendations, we have our large parcels that are hold and need more work. We have our smaller parcels, which are hold for either a nonprofit opportunity or a city-initiated project. And then we have our move forward recommendations. Again, 180 and Schultz Pass, a solicitation prioritizing development of housing units for our local workforce. Butler Eldon Lone Tree is issue solicitation prioritizing ongoing funding for housing programs through a public-private partnership. And Lockett and Fanning and redevelopment of public housing is to continue the process. I know that's a lot of information. I tried to chunk it into absorbable pieces, and I would be happy to answer all the questions that you have, or at least try to answer all the questions you have. Feedback, thoughts?
A lot of information. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm amazing and I answered all the questions, which can't be true.
Sir,
I
we actually
appreciate-
have a question from Commissioner Milazzo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. This is great. I have a question about two of the properties, the Schultz Pass and the one by the Safeway. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Both
Yep.
of those faced massive pushback from communities when whatever number of years ago, I can't even remember now, 6-ish years ago, there was an attempt to do development. Do you expect that the issue of solicitation for the Schultz Pass will find a way to satisfy some of the concerns that were expressed previously?
Not to burst your bubble, but that was 2017, so it feels more recent.
It feels like 1,000 years ago.
It was 1,000 years ago. I know, and just yesterday at the same time. I'm a realist. Will there be community pushback? We see community pushback on private developers, including affordable housing in any area of the community. I think it's fair to anticipate it. I think it's fair to also acknowledge that our housing emergency has gotten worse since that previous foray into a solicitation. I'm not naive enough to think that everyone's going to come together and hold hands and sing songs. However, my hope, my deep abiding belief is that the community now has a better understanding of what impact the lack of housing affordable to our workforce looks like, and the impacts it's having on our local businesses, et cetera. There's also been somewhat of a seed change in the community. I think we see that with the passing of the bond issue for housing. I can't predict it. We can answer the questions. As we've always been, very upfront and transparent about it. I think opening the solicitation wide instead of us saying this is what we want here gives us the ability to be open to multiple ideas that can answer that call. And let's see what comes forward. I think a lot of the opposition in the past was due to those people, was due to it being purely affordable. Original concepts were actually way back in the day conceived of as land trust ownership, which was serving up to 125% AMI. I don't want to put an AMI target or restriction on this property because we need housing all along the continuum. And so we would talk about in the solicitation, the maximization of the land use to create housing units. What does that look like? Who has access to capital in order to create it? What role can the city play in that? Is it a lease? I don't know. Is it a sale? I don't know. What's going to make sense to achieve both the highest and best use for this property, and also be somewhat accepted by the community. I've had council members over the years say, when are you bringing this forward? When are you bringing this forward? We're bringing it forward at this point in time. I wish I do have a crystal ball, but it really just looks pretty. I can't see anything. And
Thanks, Sarah.
as the other property adjacent to Safeway, we did have some community opposition there. There was somewhat less community opposition, although we did get an email. Someone said they found ancient native artifacts on the site, which we weren't able to ever track down or prove. I think any housing built adjacent to existing housing faces the strong potential of opposition. And it's our responsibility as staff to listen to that, communicate what that opposition is, really not just the opposition, but all sides to city council, and put the decision in their hands.
Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for the questions.
Any other questions or comments for Sarah?
So this is going to council on September 9th for a work session. So I'm open to feedback, and if you leave today and you're like, you know what about, please call me or email me so I can make sure that we're vetting as much as we can before we get there. We have a crackpot staff, but we can't see everything. Crackpot, that's the wrong term.
Crackerjack.
Thank you.
I was gonna wonder
Like,
about
yeah,
that.
we have a crackpot. That too. It's been a couple late nights this week, so I'm gonna pay housing staff for that one later. Apologies.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was super informative. So next up is our update from the Housing Authority Commission. So either Sarah or Commissioner Milazzo, take it away.
Well, this one's easy because we did not have a meeting this month because there was lack of agenda items.
Well,
can
there you
give-
go.
A bit more detail surrounding why that is. And so we did not have a meeting. I don't like pulling people together without business to conduct. The transfer of the Williams voucher program was effective July 1. We still don't know exactly how many of those vouchers are utilized or are not utilized. We're unwinding a very itchy ball of twine where HUD has one number, Williams has another number, and the financial arm of HUD has another. And then we have the files, and we're working to reconcile all of those pieces. I can tell you it's under 25. It's likely under 20. We're working to match landlords. Nobody's touched this program in 2 years. And so we're working to match landlords with tenants. We've done outreach with that population, et cetera, and HUD still hasn't done the final reconciliation of what funding is coming our way. We know the funding's there. I've seen the numbers. I don't have final numbers. They gave us a budget authority for $1. Yay! And then wanted us to tell them how much money we were short. And I was like, all of it. So if you guys can figure that out and let us know, that would be great. So we are still working to unwind that twine, and we're making, of course, the current voucher holders the priority within that. They have not had rent adjustments or recertifications to take income changes into consideration for 2 years. We've discovered that utility allowances were not being paid to the households for the past 2 years. And so we're doing some detective work to pull that together. And so we are unable to bring the next action that is necessary within that process until we have more information in that area.
Great, thank you. Next up is any comments or thoughts by housing commissioners. Anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Awesome. Even though, yeah, I appreciate everybody. I'm sorry I have to leave, but yeah. Just on the agenda, and even though I'm leaving, I can read the minute.
We're having a hard time hearing you. It's breaking up pretty good. Can you try one more time?
Yeah, can you hear me? Let's see. I'll put you on speaker, maybe. Is this?
I can hear you just fine now. It just was breaking up pretty badly.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just wondering, I don't know how much you heard of that, but I'd like to see if there was any chance of putting this on the agenda. It kind of goes back to the council member who came on earlier today. For developers who are coming into Flagstaff wanting to develop, and they want to put short-term rentals in the CCNRs, what conditions does the city, or what would be some of the conditions the city would have to met, I guess, for the city to not allow short-term rentals? Because I'm just, it is a state law that you can have short-term rentals, but does it have to be a by right property, or if there's rezoning, is that where the city can regulate? I would like to know and get clarification on that somewhere, somehow.
Thank you, Commissioner Brownfield. Adriana, is that just something we add to a future agenda?
That's a great question. I'm going to punt this to our other commission liaison. Sarah, can you help?
Sure. Yes, it is. We will involve legal and planning staff to make sure that we have it. It's not something we can flip by next month. Unless we can. We will work on it. We will bring it back in an expedient fashion. I haven't heard the question phrased quite that way before, so I'm hesitant to say, oh yeah, we know we can do that. So we want to bring you a fully fleshed answer. And Eric, this is your last meeting, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, then we'll be in communication and make sure you know when we're presenting that information, and if you can't make it, we'll share the presentation with you or make sure you have it.
Yeah, great. And if you didn't understand my question, I can spend more time and writing it up for you.
If you could send it email, that'd be great. And that makes sure that we're not going down a rabbit hole where you say that we missed the boat.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? All right, how about housing staff updates? Adriana.
Hello again, commissioners. I have a lot of updates today, apparently. The first one is, again, just thank you, Eric and Ross and Glenn, for your service on the Housing Commission. Related to that, we still need to fill some vacancies with eligible individuals who live within city limits and can fill the real estate professional's role. This could be a lender, it could be a builder, it could be a property manager, or any other building or real estate professional. And then we could use some more applications for the low-income housing expert, but I think we've gotten quite a few. And then, as I mentioned in my presentation, the city is hosting a homebuyer event next Wednesday, September 3rd. Feel free to tell everybody that you know and might be interested about it. The event is for Flagstaff residents considering purchasing their first home. It does have to be within city limits if they intend to use the CHAP expansion program, which offers up to $50,000 in bond fund loans, and it's for residents up to 150% of the area median income. Or for an example, it's a little over 152,000 for a family of 3. I will send the promotional flyers to you following this meeting. And then I want to say there's one last update, which is to think about putting your name in there for the chair or vice chair roles. I want to remind everybody that Devonna McLaughlin, or commissioner and chair, Devonna McLaughlin cannot serve another year of being chair. So I encourage you to consider this as a leadership opportunity for the future. It would be great experience, and we'll also need a new vice chair at the next meeting. So we'll be voting on that next meeting. And that's it from me.
Adriana,
Great,
did you say that the housing assistance was up to 250% AMI?
No, I said 150.
Okay.
Or did I say? My head's like.
I'm afraid you said
did say
250.
250.
Yeah, I wanted to
lied.
clarify.
I lied. Thank you. It's 150,000. Thank you for catching that.
You're welcome.
150%. Yes. Wow. I need to get some rest after this.
150% of area median income, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. Here, I'll lower my hand before I forget. I wanted to kind of reiterate and explain a little bit more, speak a little bit more about the financial contribution we received at Tuesday's City Council meeting. Councilmember House mentioned it briefly. Sarah spoke to it a little bit, but I wanted to share with everybody that we got our biggest financial contribution from a market rate developer ever with the Pine Haven rezoning case that's going through right now. This last Tuesday was their first read of their ordinance. It went really well. Council was really excited about a lot of the different features with the project. It is an ownership project, about 83 townhome units. And instead of providing 10% of those units as affordable, constructing them and selling them to eligible buyers, the developer instead opted to provide 1,802,000. I'm just like trying to pull up the final number. Yeah, $1,802,413 in a financial contribution that they will be paying on a per unit basis as they construct and finish their units. So it's a really big win for us. We're really excited with the flexibility of the funds. We can put this money to good use. Of course, we won't have it in a lump sum payment. It'll take some years before we realize all of this money. But it's a really big boost and we're really excited about it. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. And that's all I have. Oh, and you know what I can do is, in case anybody wants to read about it, read the rezoning case or the materials, I can put a link in the chat to the staff report from the council meeting and their final city council ordinance read, and the adoption of the resolution will be heard at the September 16th meeting, if you wanted to look into that. All right. Yeah. Commissioner Zoroya. Yeah, I'll load it right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other staff updates? Sarah Dar.
I wanted to let the commission know that the adaptive reuse program is going to City Council for approval on September 2nd. And so that piece continues to move forward. Thank you for your investment in creating the program. And we are excited to have council approval for that and to release those funds into the community as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. Last call.
Sandy, I guess I could say this verbally. I'll send the current working calendar so the commission is aware of what's going to council in the next couple of months when I send those home buyer event flyers.
Great. All right, last call. Thank you again, Commissioner Schaefer, Commissioner Brownfield, and Commissioner Slivers for your service. And with that, we will adjourn at 2:53. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.